Today we have our guest to talk, and it's a professor of business ethics, Georges Enderle, from Mendoza College of Business at the University of Notre.
Yes.
And we will be talking today about yourself, your profound experience working with the business ethics issues, I would say globally. And also we will talk about business ethics, of course, as a bigger issue. And also I would ask you to talk a little about what you think about Ukraine, because we participated already together as partners in the business survey, global survey of business ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And so you will be telling me also about what do you do here.
Okay.
So let's start from how are you here in Ukraine? How do you feel here in Ukraine? And apparently in nowadays, when the picture of Ukraine abroad, maybe it's different than what you see here, what you feel here. So could you tell us about your staying in Ukraine for the past week?
Yes. Well, I'm deeply impressed what you're doing here at UCU. I think, you know, you are a young university and a business school, but you have a lot of, well, energy and strength and clear vision, you know, how to build up that business school and university, well, to serve the country, to grow by growing the companies and the individuals. It is a similar slogan like my business school has, growing the good in business, in people. So I'm deeply impressed, and so I'm very happy that I could make the trip here, although it was a very long trip. Mm-hmm. Well, what I particularly in the first few days, I thought I'm here to learn, you know. I'm not here to tell you what you have to do. I mean, that would be arrogant and also completely wrong, because, you know, I'm coming from a small country, Switzerland, very small, and that was never involved in a war, not in the First and not in the Second World War, like Germany or France. And so I have no idea, no experience what that means. But yesterday on Sunday, I was in the canteen for lunch, and I watched the families here with many kids, how they were playing with each other. And I thought, well, when I grew up during the war, my parents probably behaved similarly, and I didn't care as a small kid, you know. But of course, they need the security of the environment, and so you know, when I told some professors at Notre Dame I'm going to Ukraine, to the Ukrainian Catholic University, they said, "Are you not afraid? Are you crazy?" And I said, "No, I'm not crazy. Look at me." You know, I'm not crazy, because I know that my friends at UCU, first, they are very careful, you know. They know the danger of war, and they have to live here. And why should I not be able to do the same and to assist? And particularly, I think if everything would be okay in peace and so on, maybe I could have delayed the trip a little bit. But now I thought it was very much, very important and urgent to come here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, and now maybe tell us a little what made you to come here, and also in this context about your research, global survey research on business ethics, where Ukraine from now, I hope, will be the part of.
Yes. Well, there are two points I want to emphasize. Well, one is of course, it was a great opportunity that at the right moment in the last 10 years, we started that global survey of business ethics 2022-24 in Bilbao in July 2022. And with friends of mine, particularly Brian Robinson from South Africa, he said, we have to do a new report. 12 years ago, we published those country reports and to know what is going on in different countries. And I realized that it is important, you know, for the teaching and the research and the companies to go deep into those questions, and not just to say, well, we want to do good things, let's start to do anything. And I mean, that was also the main reason at Notre Dame International. You remember when they said, well, you should support teaching. And we said, well, that's we are doing in the long run. But in order to teach business ethics here, we need to know what are the challenges in the country. And the business school cannot just be an island. They have to cooperate with businesses. And so to find out how businesses face those difficult situations on the one hand, and how we can help here, and what can we learn from business. So business ethics, as we developed it in Europe and in the US, always had close connections with leaders in companies who were open-minded and thought ethics is an important perspective for business.
Thank you. Now, from preliminary results of our survey made in Ukraine, we see that corruption is named one of the main challenges that business will face for the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. So, could you please bring the basics for the corruption as you define them?
Yes. Well, first of all, you know, Ukraine is not a unique case of corruption. The Business Ethics Network Africa, with about operating in over 30 countries, they have said one most important issue for business ethics for us is corruption. And I have a friend of mine from Notre Dame who teaches regularly in South Africa, and he said, well, you know, I think no country has 2 governors in prison like Illinois in the United States because of corruption. That means even in countries like the US and in other countries, European countries, corruption exists, you know. And that was now the definition. Of course, there are different definitions. But I remember when I just moved to the United States in '92, Transparency International with Mr. Eigen was founded in Berlin. And he was first officer of the World Bank. And he thought, he saw in many countries corruption is a big issue. And so he suggested to the director or the president of the World Bank to set up a division of corruption. And he said, no, that's not important. You know, that was in the early 1990s. And so Mr. Eigen went to Berlin and said, we are founding an NGO, Transparency International. And Transparency International, and we are in Berlin, in a European developed country, because many causes of corruptions are not in developing countries. They actually are in rich countries, you know, and that's why we are in Berlin. That was an important lesson I learned. So they defined corruption as the abuse of political power and authority for private purposes. So that means private people, private sector, and others use the money of corruption for their own purposes instead of using the money of the government for schools and hospitals and infrastructure, etc. So that means corruption is diverting, public money from taxpayers for private purposes. And that is a misuse, and it's economically wrong. I study economics, and when we talk about business ethics, often with my colleagues in the economics and finance, I make some economic argument, and say, look, corruption is something which hurts the society and the economy, and that's why transparency is so important, to disclose what companies are doing and how they use their relations to government, lobbying, etc., and how the government can make decisions what to do with that money, But corruption also exists between companies, And so you have those alliances of corruption, which are sometimes, enormous, I was told at that conference on doing business in Ukraine, in Washington, 1.5 years ago, that, the money of donors from the US for Ukrainian purposes, that is no corruption, or not much. There's more a domestic problem of corruption. And I think that has to do with the transition from the Soviet regime to a market economy. And we could look at this problem also in Poland, in Hungary, in the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia and Czech Republic. So it's not unique. But it is a serious issue. And I think, as I said, I can make strong economic arguments. I can also make strong managerial arguments, A CEO in a company who uses this for private purposes instead for the company or to promote the economy. Employees, some critical employees know what is happening within the company, and so they, those top managers, I think, are losing trust, and they say one thing in public and do another thing in private, and so they are undermining the confidence, trust in the company, or also with stakeholders outside the company. And then, of course, it is an ethical issue, which means that to be honest, to be, also justice, to be just to those who deserve that support should get it, and not for other purposes. So, but to have those arguments on the one hand is an important thing, but then how to change the culture is an important but not an easy thing. Not only in individual companies, but then also in the sectors. Mm-hmm. And it is interesting that different sectors like the banking sector or the mining sector or the food sector or so on, they have different types of corruption. Mm-hmm. And I think one needs to know what that is. And I think also corruption has to be distinguished against bribery, bribery is also bad. But I taught in China many times, many years. And that I realized that personal relations between companies and customers and so on are very important, And so sometimes it's difficult to say what is a bribe, what is a tip, and what is a gift, This is not so easy. And from a transactional point of view, I think it's fair to say that a bribe is a two-way relationship, I pay a bribe and I get something back, I pay the government and I will be promoted in the government or whatever. A gift is just a one-way transaction. I give that, I mean, I give my scholarship, you know, to those young students, and I don't expect another that they pay me something. No, I mean, I'm happy with the letter they sent me, but that's all, you know. Mm-hmm. And then what is a tip? That's something in between. It's so to speak a 1.5 way transaction. In Switzerland, we don't pay tips anymore, but in the US, you have to pay tips 15–18%. But if you are not happy with the service in the restaurant, you don't give a tip. You know, that's possible. So there are different kinds of bribery, tip, and gift, and corruption. As I said, can be in relations between private business and government in lobbying. You know, lobbying, for instance, what I heard now in Slovakia, that they want to abolish harsh punishments for corruption, because some companies are pushing the government to change the laws, you know. Mm-hmm. And I think it is important to have critical media and to disclose what is happening in society. And I mean, corruption sooner or later is coming to the public, you know. Just one example, how companies, and that is the famous car company Volkswagen in Germany, how it cheated systematically those government agencies who had to control the output of cars, you know, for air pollution. And they said, we care about the environment, and so we make sure that our cars are not polluting the air anymore. And that was true when they passed the test in those governmental shops, you know. And as soon as they were out of that control, they had software to change to 45 times more air pollution than before, you know. Mm-hmm. And of course that was cheating, and it was not transparent. It was and so finally NGO in California discovered that, and then it became also known in Germany and in Europe, and Volkswagen ran into enormous problems and had to pay a lot, you know. So that's just a recent example for cheating, and which I think smart entrepreneurs and top managers think in the long term. And they say, well, we have to exist not only now, but also in 2 or 5 or 7 years. And that honesty is the best policy.
Yeah, thank you. And back to corruption again. You said that we should change our culture, or we would say that maybe mindset also. But where it starts from the changing of rules of the, I don't know, society, or even on the governmental level, yeah, or the law, for instance, or is it starting from the changing culture and mindset?
Well, it's a complex issue, you know. And of course, the first answer is that young people should learn to be honest in the families, you know, and from the parents. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I had high respect for my parents because they told us the truth, and how they talked. My father in politics, he was an honest man. So that's one thing. But I mean, business schools cannot change the families, you know. They can say they should do something, you know. But at the business school, I think, and that is the philosophy of Notre Dame, that business students at the age of 18, 19, 20, they need a course, a mandatory course, an introduction to business ethics. And we introduced that at 2 levels, a 2 credit course, an introduction, and then many electives in finance or marketing, etc. So they learn the language of ethics, you know. Many people, they think they know what is right and wrong, but they cannot say it's a violation of human rights or sustainable standards. So you need to learn how to express what is right and wrong in terms which other people can understand, and so you have a meaningful conversation. We had even have still for the MBA program at Notre Dame the requirement that all the MBAs have to do two credit courses. One is the ethical foundation of business, and the other one is specializing in different fields of business with ethics. So I taught international business ethics many years, but also ethics in finance. And that was highly interesting. And I could involve Professor of Finance of our business school to come to my classroom, and we discussed cases in the United States of banks and so on, what happened. And he said what he can say from his field. He said, I don't know much about ethics, that's why we have George here, you know. And so together we could say applied ethics has to be taught in a consistent way in business schools and also in other, I mean, in politics and in many other fields. But how to make the step to companies, you know, and that is another important thing. I know in the United States, association of big companies who explicitly train their people to change the culture against corruption, you know. And I know also at that conference on Ukraine, I met a woman from Kiev who is responsible for the Global Compact of the United Nations, and they developed a video to fight against corruption in Ukraine. And she said they did it about 3-4 years ago, and these are instruments, you know, to get more aware and to say how to change the culture. But it's a long process. But you need the strong determination of educators, but then also, I mean, your question, what about the law, you know? And I think the law plays an important role for compliance, but it's not the only one, you know. I always tell my lawyer friends, you are very important, you know, but you are not the only ones who are important, because culture is more than just following the law. It is a habit, social habit, which has to be learned and practiced, and then the law can tell us what the bad guys, or to punish the bad guys. But the good guys, they should understand it from their own education and so on. So we need ethics and law to fight corruption.
Do you see ethical challenges related to corruption in Ukraine, if any?
I think I'm too early to give an answer for that. I mean, I very much look forward to your investigation, you know, for the Global Survey of Business Ethics. I could imagine that, you know, say maybe some monopolies and big companies in the eastern part of the country are, inclined to be corrupt. And sometimes, I mean, companies are facing complex issues, you know, decisions to make which are not so clear-cut. I want to understand that, but for the time being, I cannot give you a clear answer. I very much look forward to your results of the survey.
I hope we will know soon or find out soon.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and now let's talk about corporate responsibility, or maybe even sustainability of business.
Yeah.
And apparently maybe related to small and middle businesses, not so much corporate,
yes,
let's say. So what are the pillars of corporate responsibility and sustainability for the companies, but also for the countries maybe, or even globally?
Well, you know, I have been involved in that discussion for many years. And I mentioned the Global Compact of the United Nations, which was started in 2000. And it took the United Nations about 11 years to set up a research team and to come up with UN guidelines to respect for human rights and to respect human rights, you know. And for me, I mean, I was always interested in international business ethics. That's why that's the name of the chair at Notre Dame. It's not just business international. And that's why I could travel a lot around the world, you know, and to do business ethics in China. And so the question for me is, well, what are accepted common ethical standards and principles which are important for Ukraine and for Germany and for the US and for Angola and for Russia, etc. And I think never in history humankind came to an answer to that question after the Second World War. Second World War was horrible, and Ukraine, you know, with the Soviet Union suffered enormously, you know, and we had the Holocaust, and we had the problems how Japan invaded China and Taiwan and other things. So, but it was interesting that during the war, negotiations started between the US and Germany and France and also Soviet Union. What are the standards for a peaceful world, you know, after the Holocaust? And the answer was finally in negotiations of 2 years, hard negotiations, and come up with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so these are 30 human rights, civil and political, but also economic, social, and cultural rights. So my dissertation, or my second dissertation, is on the human right to a decent livelihood in Switzerland. You know, what does that mean? Why is it important, etc., etc. It was pretty shocking. They said it's not necessary in Switzerland, but it is. And finally, after I left Switzerland, they they enacted an article in the Swiss constitution that this human right is important for every people in Switzerland. But what I'm saying is that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by John Ruggie and the UN Principles on Business and Human Rights. And what was new 12 years ago, 13 years ago, was new that first they speak of corporate responsibility, not corporate social responsibility. You know, the S is not clear, it's a vague term, but CR. And what does it mean? Responsibility in philosophical terms, and the corporation as the entity who is responsible. And then what with regard to human rights, to respect human rights, a company has to do that, to do no harm to indigenous people by polluting the rivers or in the workplace, etc., and to remedy violations of human rights. That is the responsibility of companies. And the government has also responsibilities in cooperation with companies to protect. That means in the country, everybody should protect it for those human rights to respect and illuminate. And so in the last 12 years, many companies embraced it, you know. And the newest step was before Christmas in November, mid-November, when the European Union came with the European Commission and the European Parliament proposed a so-called Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. That means all big companies, these are big, I come to the small companies later, but all the very big companies headquartered or operating in Europe have to respect those human rights and environmental standards in their whole global supply chain of those. If it goes to Antarctic or to Nigeria or to China, etc., you know. And they have to declare, this is our strategy of due diligence, what we make sure that it does not happen. And if it happens, we have to fix it. And we report what we do, etc. So I'm very happy about that. I think that's a progress. But it has to be implemented, of course. What they don't say is what should small and medium and micro enterprises do. And the UN principles for business and human rights include all companies, also the small, and so often maybe husband and wife are running a shop, you know, that's a micro enterprise. Are they allowed to violate, say, the human rights of their customers? No, they are not, you know, that is. But that is not legally binding. Or small companies, they are up to, I think, 50 employees, and then medium-sized enterprises up to 250 employees. They also have to, and they get guidelines. I mean, clear criteria. How can we improve that? And so I think we made quite a lot of progress since 2000, but of course it's not enough. It is a beginning.
Okay, then how do you see the role of Ukrainian business in balancing profit and social responsibility too? And also right now that we have chosen our path already many years ago, that we are going to be part, or we want to be part of European Union. So our businesses should be also acting on the scene of European Union and to be responsible and on the level that, I don't know, the regulations of European Union also want us.
Yes. Well, first of all, you know, in 1970, that means now in how many? 54 years, Milton Friedman wrote a small article, The Business of Business is Business. What is the purpose of business? To maximize profit, you know. And that is still many people, business people think so. And I think that's not true, you know. To maximize shareholder value means that the shares, that shareholders are the owners of the company. They are not the owners of the company, they are the owners of the shares, which they can sell tomorrow, you know, and buy some new shares after tomorrow and back and forth. They own the shares. But so a friend of mine from Harvard Business School, Lynn Payne, with a colleague, published that important article, to maximize shareholder value is nonsense. Economically speaking, legally speaking, ethically speaking. But I mean, in the mind, it is in the mind of many people. So if even Milton Friedman would, if say maximizing is wrong, it would say optimizing, you know, optimizing, say, within given constraints. And he said, well, there are some ethical principles which we still have to consider, you know. But my answer is, well, businesses have to make profit, yes. And that should be recognized, and it's an important part of business, of course, you know, and to invest in the future. But it's not maximizing. It means to make profit and to take into account the needs of the different stakeholders, not shareholders. The shareholders are one stakeholder who own the shares, but we have the employees. They have also a stake in the company. They are affected by the company, and they affect also the company. We have the customers. We have the investors and many others. So you know that how to balance profit and corporate social, or well, some say corporate social responsibility. I don't like that term, but corporate responsibility, or say environmental issues. And so I think the company has to be clear about the strategy. Profit is a means to achieve the purpose of the company, which is, well, say for instance, to create wealth, in my terminology. You know? Create wealth means, for instance, to increase human capital, and that means to make help human beings to get overcome sickness, to get healthy in the human to strengthen their health, or it can be in education, or it can be in well, hospitals, you know, and so wealth creation, as I define it, is pretty comprehensive, and that's the purpose of companies. And many good examples exist. I mean, in my book, I bring some very good examples. One example to build social capital or trust relations. That was Mohamed Yunus, who got the Nobel Prize in Bangladesh for microfinance and Grameen Bank. And we could invite him, and I could interview him and so on in Sao Paulo. And he said, banking money is important for people on the countryside. So my microfinance, the offices are on the countryside in villages. Grameen means village, not in the cities, in Dhaka, you know. And I want to invite, say, 7, 8 people from various families to come and to tell them, to make a proposal, what they want to do, say, for instance, to buy a cow in order to have some milk and sell it on the market. And so he said, and then he said, can I borrow some money from banks? And the banks in Bangladesh said, no, you know, those poor people use the money just to buy rice for food, you know, and consumption. And he said, no, that's not true. They invest, you know, they think in long term. They invest in cows and education and so on. And then he realized that women are much better than men, you know. So many, a big part of the microfinance Grameen is run by women. And that is an example how trust in people, with the support of the community, of course, you know, can create social capital, trust in society. I mean, for that he got the Nobel Prize, you know, in 2006. But that's just an example. But yeah. Okay.
How do you think Ukrainian companies, but also we as a business school, can promote this ethical entrepreneurial culture?
Yes.
Within the country?
Well, I mean, again, I would need the concrete problems a little bit much better here of companies. But one suggestion is, you know, Ukraine sooner or later, hopefully sooner than later, will join the EU, European Union. And that means Ukrainian companies have to be prepared for that step. So in Washington, for instance, they said, we have to make sure that the transportation system of rail trafficking, you know, how to transport corn in the Ukraine to the borders to Poland, when they have to all to change into other wagons of the railways, you know. That's a big issue. Or how to make agriculture sustainable, you know, in the long run. Or how to make sure that some components in agriculture, or some components for agriculture, are not important anymore from Russia, you know. There are still some coming. So I think smart business people think about, well, so to speak, the reconstruction or the construction of a new country, Ukraine, and how best can we in our sector serve, well, to make profit, yes, but it means wealth creation in this comprehensive sense. And the EU is, I think, most of the countries are supportive. Even Hungary now had to give in, you know, for the support of those 50 billion euros, finally. But I mean, to prepare, what does it mean to do business in the country here, and then also to be prepared for connections to other countries in Europe, but also, well, US and Middle East.
Okay, so it's time of the rise of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. And I think it's a very important issue, and everybody is talking about this. Is it harm or is it a benefit? And what new ethical dilemmas do you forecast for businesses apparently with this technologies rising?
In digital technology and transformation. Well, that's a huge issue, you know. And I'm, in a way, I tell to myself sometimes, you're too old to address that, you know. And so, but I have good colleagues who are much younger, and they are, a friend of mine, he's professor of business ethics and social ethics in Switzerland. He published an outstanding book. I had to review it, and now a second, digitalization at the workplace. You know what this does, and there are huge opportunities, of course. You know, with digital technology, you can improve the productivity of workers. You know, they don't have to do stupid things. A friend of mine in Uganda told me, you know, digital technology helps us to helps the workers to not to go into dangerous places, but we can send drones there and so on. So I mean, many good things, but I think the danger is that first digital technology is controlled by a few huge corporations, you know, and so who makes sure that they are making decisions to the benefit of the country and not just to the benefit of their companies. And that is, we cannot just trust they are good guys, you know. So we need strong legal rules. And I mean, in terms of privacy, as I was told, the EU has now pretty good standards to protect privacy, but this is only one part of the problem. You know, the big problem, I think, is that digital technology, or many people talk about AI, artificial intelligence. And my friend I mentioned before said, please forget this stupid term, because it suggests that logarithms can make decisions of conscience, you know, intelligence and conscience. And that's impossible. I mean, it is up to the human beings who finally have to make the decisions and to control digital technology and logarithms. And I think that is a very important point. A few days ago, he sent me an op-ed in which he makes exactly this point. How to convince politicians and businesses to move in that direction. Well, I know that the UN is discussing, wants to set up a special division how to deal with artificial intelligence or digital. My friend talks about digital data systems. You know, these are basically data systems about your life, you know, almost everything, and they can tell you what you're going to decide next year, you know. Mm-hmm. Not only to what food you are going to buy, but maybe what you are going to invest, or even some people say to change your marriage, or what, all kinds of things, you know. And they use those data sets, which are enormous, billions of data, in a few seconds, you know, that works. But it's dangerous. And then, I mean, if the defense of the country is depending on logarithms, that's very dangerous, you know. At the end, it should be the president and well, political instances who make those decisions.
So it's dangerous to let the machines, not the AI itself, but to let the machines to make
human decisions
for us.
Right, yeah, yes. So we use this as techniques, you know, we can use that in many ways, but at the end we should be, human beings should be the master and not machines, yeah.
Then maybe just suggestions, of course, but when the war is over in Ukraine, so what do you think will be the biggest challenges for our country in business ethics, apparently?
Yeah. Well, there are many, I think. One, of course, is just reconstruction and financing the infrastructure, you know. Today, the infrastructure in Ukraine is, well, in the east is bombed, complete. Mariupol is horrible. But infrastructure means also transportation and say, I was told that Ukraine has developed a highly sophisticated system of, digital data systems for the health sector, you know, or for civil to know what people are doing, say, in education and so on. And this is a big advantage, I think, Ukraine has compared to many European countries who are lagging behind that evolution, you know. But I think, you know, as I told you, I taught many years in China, and at the time when Deng Xiaoping was president. And what he said is to open the country to the world, and at the same time to reform or reconstruct within the country. And that's a dialectic. You cannot do the one first and then the other second. You have, this goes back and forth. And so, I mean, by, say, improving the railways in Ukraine, you do it in the country, but you do that in cooperation with European countries, for instance. And so, but there are lots of important things, but I would say, you know, what you are doing here at UCU and in the business school is to educate and to educate young people, men and women, very seriously, and so that they can really be very instrumental. Not only they have the knowledge, but they have also the determination and the engagement, you know, to say, I want to make a contribution to my country, reconstructing a new Ukraine. And so that motivation is very important in addition to the knowledge.
And in this context, what would you suggest, or what would be your advice to our young professionals? Maybe, I don't know if to make their path easier, but I don't know, to win?
You mean young professionals in companies or
no, I mean like students, our younger graduates, the ones who will be building this country.
Yeah. Well, you know, nobody knows when the war will end. And so, I mean, they have to struggle with the situation right now. I mean, how to do solid and open-minded and critical education in the classes. You know, they should not take it easily, you know. I mean, that is very serious. And the better they are educated, the better their service will be to society later on. And also, I think it is probably helpful to use that they use their imagination, you know. not just to think, well, we have to reconstruct, do what has been done in the past, but how should Ukraine look like in the future, you know? And so to say, well, I'm, say, interested in computer science, I can do much more, you know, here, or I'm interested in economics or in management. What does it mean to treat employees in the company fairly and so that they work together and not against each other? So imagination, and to discuss that with colleagues and classmates, you know. I mean, for dreaming, well, of course we can always, dreaming is, I'm not a dreamer, but I think dreaming has a good side. And that means to say, okay, our situation today is like this. But imagine, what does that mean in 3 years? Or if you want to set a family, you know, what do you need, and what kind of connections would you like to, or should you to continue after the studies? I mean, that happens often now. I mean, when students meet in difficult situations, they became closer, you know, and deep friendships are formed, and not just to throw them away after studying, or but to continue to do that.
You had a chance already to talk to our students, Ukrainian students.
Yes.
How our students differ from American
Are different
students.
from American students. First, I have to say, the University of Notre Dame has a reputation to have outstanding undergraduate students, you know, undergrads. So the business school with undergrads was #1 in the country for a couple of years. And I realized that they are really very motivated. But so they are smart, they are not just studying, they are maybe playing music, they are playing football, that's possible, you know, that's another problem also. But they are helping out in a homeless center and so on, that's good. But, well, I mean, I think it's fair to say, they are a bit naive, you know, about life. And I think your students here are not naive, you know. They know what life means, and to die, you know, on the front lines. And so that is a big difference, I think. And well, otherwise, another point, Notre Dame is proud to say that our students, undergraduate students, spend half a year or 1 year or 4 years abroad, you know. And I think that's a good thing, you know. So they can study well in London, or in Angers, or in Italy, Rome. Students of architecture spend 1 year of architecture studies in Rome to study classical architecture. So they learn, but the business students often go to London. And I say, well, that's not really abroad. You speak the same language, you know. You should go to Germany or to Italy or to Spain or to Santiago de Chile. Then you will realize. And I mean, that is a recommendation I would offer to your students here, that they would have the opportunity to spend some time during their studies abroad in a different university. And I know that I think you are connected to the Erasmus program. And you know, that is a very good thing in Europe. I know young people in Switzerland who use that, you know. They started maybe in Fribourg, and then they went to Florence. They had to learn Italian and to study there 1 year, and came back, and then maybe they could go. So that's a second point which I would recommend. And well, from the business ethics point of view, I think it would be important that the business school and the university have a strong focus on ethics. I think that is in your vision. It's also for Notre Dame in the strategic framework for Notre Dame 2030. Ethics is a major emphasis in all fields, you know, including engineering, you know, and etc., and business, of course, and politics, and philosophy, and etc. So these are 3 points which...
Thank you. I hope very much that we will reach all our goals, and also within the business ethics established and spread out in Ukraine, and promoted here too as an important issue for our businesses and people, let's say.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
with your help and support, of course.
Thank you very much for your questions, but also for what you do. You know, I get a better understanding how busy, how many tasks you have to fulfill at the same time, you know. And that is a big challenge, but I encourage you, and I told you I support you as much as I can. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you.